and welcome to the second annual meeting of Turkey Mosaic Foundation. My name is Yalın Karadoğan. I'm one of the co-founders, and I hope you're keeping safe and sane in the current environment. Now, last year we had our first annual meeting, and the founders and trustees, we hosted a dinner. As you can see in the picture, there was nearly 100 people in the room. It was a really nice room. We were really socializing. We had guests on stage. We were shaking hands. We were hugging. We were kissing on both cheeks. And we really felt like we were connecting with our donors. And we really felt like the excitement we had about our first year achievements was shared across the room. Now, unfortunately, we cannot repeat that experience due to obvious reasons, and we're social distancing. But the way we like to think about it is we're social uniting. We're uniting around the social cause. And for that, we are grateful that you've been able to join us tonight. Thank you very much for dialing in. Thank you for being with us. We know evenings are precious, regardless of if you're in a lockdown. So thank you for being here tonight with us and listening to our story. Now, you've all been in lockdown for 2 months. So of course, you're all Zoom experts. You know the rules. If any children walks in, we sort of ignore that and as if nothing happened. Or we have muted all of you, as obviously is necessary for this format. But we do have a chat box, as you will have seen, and as you know. So please feel free to type in any questions you have for us, and the speakers will check and we'll try to pick them up as we go along. We'd love to make this as online interactive as possible. For those of you that are not familiar with us, Turkey Mosaic Foundation was founded 2.5 years ago. And we are a UK registered grant giving organization. We're a charity of charities. We collect donations in the UK with all the UK tax sort of status. And we distribute them to our grantees in Turkey through a very careful selection process that we go through. We focus on a number of key areas that we as the founders are passionate about. These include children, women, education, health, environment, and more recently, we've also expanded into culture and the arts. Now, let me take you to a couple of places around Turkey. Let's start in the southeast, in Diyarbakır, in fact, in Sur. Now, as you know, Sur was the site of a conflict, a major conflict 5 years ago. And many of the homes and neighborhoods were devastated, as you can see in this picture. This kind of conflict has a traumatic effect on everybody living in the town, but particularly on the children of Sur. We have been working very closely. It is estimated actually that there is 350,000 people who have lost their homes as a result of the conflict in the region. There's an organization that was founded 3 years ago called Rengarenk Umutlar Derneği, Colorful Hopes Association. And they have been working with the children of Sur to help alleviate the pain of the trauma that the children have experienced. Some of this is direct psychological support. Some of this is through arts and crafts, through theater and other educational games. And with your donations, we have supported this association with an institutional grant, institutional support. And we're humbled that we've managed to play a small role in repairing children's lives in this very fragile part of Turkey. Now let's go from southeast to the Black Sea coast, to Ordu. Many of you, of course, will know the Black Sea region. Maybe you know the music, the kemençe, the instruments, the food, the pide, maybe the football teams, maybe you're familiar with the climate, but also hazelnuts. Hazelnuts is a very big deal in Ordu and in the Black Sea coast. In fact, it is estimated 1 in 4 hazelnuts in the world comes out of Ordu. So next time you place your Ocado order for delivery, if you buy some hazelnuts, it's very likely it will have come out of Ordu. Now, to satisfy this world demand of hazelnuts, of course, is a very big deal. And in fact, it's such a big deal that that seasonal harvest that happens in the August, September timeframe, everybody gets involved. And when I say everybody, I literally mean everybody that you can see in the picture, including the grandparents, but also the children. In fact, Ordu is not a big town. It has 750,000 people, But on top of it, there's another 100,000, more than 100,000 that come into Ordu for the seasonal harvest. This creates a significant operation and significant burden, and an international labor organization actually calls seasonal agricultural workers as one of the worst parts of child labor that children can be associated with. Again, there's an organization called Ordu Kadını Güçlendirme Derneği, or the Association of Empowering Women. They started several years ago with an objective of empowering women and focusing on women's rights. They have since then broadened their mandate to focus on children as well. And we, through your donations, Mosaic, Turkey Mosaic Foundation is supporting a project here called Oyunlarla Çocuk Hakları, which focuses on children's rights and the gamification of these children's rights, raising awareness for children's rights, focusing on children between ages 9 and 12, aiming to touch 400 children and of course their parents and their carers. And we are proud that we're playing a small role in the development of civil society in Ordu, but also a small difference in these children's lives. Now let's move on to Ankara. You've all been in lockdown for 2 months. Some of you may have decided that you have a little bit more extra time on your hands because you're not commuting, you're not traveling. Some of you may have decided to perhaps pick up an instrument. Maybe that guitar that's in the cupboard that's been sitting there for 10 years, maybe you pulled it out and tried to play a few songs and to try to learn. One of the first things you may have noticed if you did any of that is you need notes to play. Now, of course, when you can see the notes, it's relatively easy to try to learn to play a song. If you cannot see the notes, if you're visually impaired, if you're blind, then the notes need to be produced in this Braille format that you see. That's the only way for you to actually see the notes. And Turkey is significantly behind other countries in the accessibility of these notes, the actual transferring of the notes in the format that we know into the Braille format. With your donations, once again, we've tried to make a difference here. We're working with Eğitimde Görme Engelliler Derneği, Association of Visually Impaired in Education. They're working on building a database, putting together a database of a library of 2,500 songs in a program called Engelsiz Notalar, accessible notes. These songs will be shared with universities and therefore get distributed around the country, and it will be essentially making the notes available for the visually impaired to allow them to maybe pick up one of these very few hobbies that they can really get engaged with to really make a difference in their lives. So these 3 stories from Ankara, Ordu, and Sur are 3 among 16 different stories that we have supported in 2019. 16 organizations and or projects that we have worked with. Behind each one is a fascinating story, and behind each one are fascinating people. And we're delighted to have a few of us with us tonight to tell us directly the on-the-ground experience they have in terms of what they do. Now, before we go into that, I'd like to pass on to Nilüfer to talk a little bit about one of our co-founders, to talk about what we've done in 2019, how we do what we do, how we select these organizations, and to give you a little bit more color on our 2nd year of our operations. But before I do that, we did promise to check the chat box. So I'd like to take a quick look. Yes, there's a question on COVID-19, and we will cover that. Thank you very much. And that is the only question I can see. So we will cover the COVID in the agenda. Thank you for that question. And with that, Nilüfer, I will pass it on to you. Thank you for your attention, everyone.
Thank you, Yalın. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Nilüfer Atalay, and I'm one of the founding trustees of Turkey Mosaic Foundation. As virtual as it may be, it's very good to be together again. It's great to see some familiar faces, also some new faces as well. So it's wonderful to see you all. So we heard from Yalın some moving stories and examples from our grantees. I'd now like to take you through Mosaic's journey, our fundraising activities, and a summary of our grant programs in 2019. As many of you know, in our first year, we worked hard to form a very strong foundation for our platform. Since then, we've seen the growth of this platform thanks to our wonderful community that welcomed Mosaic deeper into their hearts. We've been lucky to receive help and support from this community in every aspect, from bake sales to birthday celebrations, ranging from 50th birthdays to as young as a first birthday celebration, where all gifts helped charities in Turkey. We've received corporate donations thanks to our friends who engage their employers and also their workplace. A New Year's bazaar and concert were organized thanks to the amazing efforts of our group of friends in Wimbledon. Zeynep's Mosaic lectures, book club meetings, these were all examples of independently organized events to support our foundation. And most special of all was to receive donations in memory of a dear friend, Meltem Göçer, who sadly passed away last year. Our platform and capabilities also enabled us to quickly launch a funding campaign on our Just Giving platform when an earthquake hit Elazığ early this year. We were able to quickly raise £21,000 from 227 supporters and mobilize the first cycle to Hayata Destek Support to Life Foundation. You'll be hearing from them shortly this evening. And we were very proud to be able to mobilize the support and also use our platform to be able to help at such a time of crisis. We've received endorsements from celebrity supporters, such as top golfer Francesco Molinari, our world-renowned pianist and composer Fazıl Say. We were mentioned on social media by profiles, famous profiles in Turkey, such as Zeynep'in Harikalar Diyarı and Blogcu Anne. We're also in partnership with Bonvilla, an online Turkish supermarket. So as you can see, our mosaic, this little art piece made up of small stones coming together, is becoming woven into the fabric of the Turkish community in London. And we're very proud to bring like-minded friends together. So moving to our slide for events in 2019, here's a summary. We started the year with an event to promote gender equality in March in partnership with Turkish WIN, Turkish Women's International Network. This was a successful event where we screened the film Yapabilirsin, You Can Do It, by Tuluhan Tekelioğlu, followed by a great panel discussion on success against the odds. In June, as Yalın mentioned, we held our first annual meeting and dinner where we shared our first annual reports with our supporters, financial donors, and where we took the opportunity to thank all those that help us to form this strong foundation, including our web designer, Troy Digital, our logo designer, Juno London, video production support, Nople Productions, legal support, Reed Smith. We were matched with them through Advocates for International Development. Our accountants, Elton & Co., who all helped us on a pro bono basis. So we took that opportunity to say thank you to those who helped us to form the foundation. In July, we organized our third study trip in Istanbul, where we had the opportunity to meet with our partner organization, Sivil Toplum İçin Destek Vakfı, Support Foundation for Civil Society. And we met with our grantees as well as other civil society leaders. And you can view these videos on our YouTube channel. In September, we took part in Bgc Charity Day with Francesco Molinari as our ambassador. This was a successful day with significant fundraising for us. We ended the year with more fun activities, first involving our young supporters. We launched Youth for Youth Challenge with children supporting our children's fund with various activities such as bake sales. A New Year's concert and bazaar were organized thanks to our friends of Mosaic group. Please get in touch with us if you'd like to be included in this group and if you would like to help us organize more fundraising activities. We're very thankful for all their efforts. Moving on to the next slide, please, Yalın. Yes, so moving on to our fund programs in 2019. We've launched 6 different types of funds. You're very welcome and encouraged to please view our website, where you can see all the details on our grantees and also the projects or the institutional funding that we're supporting. You can also see the links to the organizations that we're supporting, get more information about them. First Gender Equality Fund was launched for the first time last year, where we supported 2 organizations. They were both very close to our hearts. We will Stop Femicides platform, Kadın Cinayetlerini Durduracağız platformu, and Flying Broom Foundation, Uçan Süpürge. You may be familiar with their recent success in hosting their film festival online during the quarantine. They've done a great job. We also launched our institutional fund for the first time. This is quite special in grant giving space, as there are very few organizations who assist charities with organizational capacity building. These can include rent, resource development, stakeholder management relations, project writing, communications. For this sort of core support, there are not that many organizations out there who are able to help them. So our institutional fund is quite special, and we also take pride in not just providing financial support, but also mentorship support to guarantees. So it's a holistic approach to giving grants. Our institutional fund supported İmece Initiative Association in İzmir, İZEV, Istanbul Foundation for People with Mental Disabilities, you may be familiar with them, and CODA, Rural Schools Transformation Network. You may also be familiar with them, as they were one of our first grantees as well in our first year. Moving on to our Culture and Arts Fund, in cooperation with İKSV, Istanbul Culture and Arts Association, we have launched Culture and Arts Fund for the first time. And yes, as Yalın mentioned, this was a year of first for us in terms of our funds. And we supported organizations, including Development Workshop. You'll be hearing again from them this evening. And also Puruli Culture and Arts, who've organized Accessible Film Festival. Very interesting projects. We have also relaunched our Children's Fund, where we supported FISA, ID and Arts Workshop Association, Fikir Sanat Atölyesi. And the 2 other organizations that we've supported are the ones that Yalın already mentioned, Ordu and Rengarenk. So they were also funds that were supporting the children's initiatives. And with the donations received in memory of our friend Meltem Göçer, we have launched Meltem Göçer Fund, and we've supported EGED. Again, as Yalın mentioned, it's a beautiful project touching many hearts. And also Music for Peace Foundation, Barış için Müzik, again, another organization that's familiar to those of you who've come to our launch event 2.5 years ago. They were one of our first grantees. So we also have donor advised funds, some as directed by the donors, such as Zeytin Çekirdekleri, Toft, Kuzeydoğa, and Tanısan Seversin. Again, you'll be able to see more details on these on our website. So this is a very brief summary of our fund programs. I think you can see on the chat box, you can also see the detailed information there through that link. So moving on to just a visual snapshot of the donations raised and the grants distributed in 2019. As you can see, we've been able to increase the donations that we've received in our first year, and to a total of £128,000. And we have also significantly increased the grants to 95,000 in 2019 from 84,000 in the previous year. And you can also see on the pie chart there the breakdown in terms of the funds. In terms of the difference, this is basically our reserve funds that we're keeping in the bank, basically. We are continuing to operate on a completely volunteering basis from here in London. So most of the services that we're receiving are on a pro bono basis. All the trustees are volunteering. So we're continuing to operate at a very low cost level. In fact, 88% of our donations received goes directly to charities in Turkey, and we're very proud of that ratio. And we're looking to hopefully grow these numbers. As Yalın will mention later on, we've had a strong start to this year despite all the COVID developments. But we're hoping to see these graphs grow in the coming years, and thanks to all your support as well. And with that, I'll be passing over to Ergem, who will be discussing the strategy of Kakuma Atölyesi, one of our grantees, as we've mentioned, and you'll be hearing more from them later on. Thank you very much. Ergem'cim, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for, okay, sorry. Thank you, Nilüfer, for the introduction. I'd like to introduce Sinem Bayraktar from the Development Workshop Cooperative in Turkey. She is a team leader on program on elimination of child labor. Welcome, Sinem. You are also here.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for inviting us.
Of course, you are one of our grantees, and we really want to introduce your work to our donors and friends. So first of all, can you please introduce the Development Workshop Cooperative to us? What are the drivers behind this organization? What are the core activities?
Okay. Thanks for all for inviting us again, and sorry for my English if I mistakenly pronounce something, because I've been not using it for a long time. So Development Workshop Cooperative, Kakuma Atölyesi Cooperative, is founded in 2004 as a cooperative. We have shareholders, not members. We are not an association. But it is founded by an action group who are involved in a research of International Labour Organization, ILO's research on child labor in cotton harvesting in Adana. So in 2002, when this group of people came together and did this research, they decided to work on such issues of social development professionally, and also like a civil society organization. But the options are very few in Turkey, how to structure yourself. Was few and still is few. You either become an association, a foundation, or on the other side, you just open a company. So cooperative is kind of in the middle of these two. And it has the principles of solidarity, democratic participation, collective production, and one vote for just one person kind of rule. So they selected the cooperative as a structure. But what they did is kind of a trick that's made in the contract of the cooperative, that they said they will not share the profit, what we call it savings, to the shareholders. So that made the cooperative as is a not-for-profit cooperative. So it became an NGO in 2004. And we have shareholders, like I said, they're all around the world, not in Turkey only, and all around the country in different cities. But we have an office in Ankara, so you may call it the headquarters. But we are doing a lot of research, so being in the field. So we go a lot, I mean, all the provinces. So at the moment, we are staying at homes, but we are still having the information coming from the field. So that's why we are founded, the social development issues of Turkey, of region. And I can also say that we don't have any permanent staff, and we will never have. This is kind of a principle for us, because we assign people, employ people within projects, programs, or consultancy work. So it can be like a one-day work of survey, being a surveyor, or 24 months of program management. So at the moment, I have a couple of hats in my head. One of them is being the team leader of the cooperation program we implement with UNICEF Turkey office, which is elimination of child labor. But I also work as a trainer, as a researcher. I also do volunteer work. So it is not just we are professionally working, it's also we are volunteering because we are human rights activists, most of us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a different sort of strategy, which I'd like to also talk about the kind of project Turkey Mosaic Foundation is giving the grant for, because it's a very unique project. It combines data and storytelling. So can you please introduce that project to our donors?
Okay. When people knows about the development workshop Kakuma atölyesi, they just think about the seasonal agriculture workers, because for the last 16 years we've been doing research on the field, both identifying the problems and the solutions with the people, and also we've been doing advocacy work, how to change the policies, how to enhance the policies or strengthen the policies and implementations at the local level. So seasonal agriculture workers are the target groups we know a lot about. With the Mosaic Foundation's donations, actually, we wanted to use the art of cinema, filmmaking, as a storytelling tool for the people, and also for us as an advocacy tool. So we want to use filmmaking techniques. We teach them these techniques and everything to show them that they can voice up what they're living by themselves. So it won't be just us identifying what their situations are, what are the solutions they needed, what are their needs, but then they will have their own angle of seeing it. Maybe they will realize from now on, and then they can use even their phones to shoot some videos, some kind of art making style. So they can also use this. So Sihirli Lamba, the Magic Lamp project, built upon this. But it was also a tool for the participation of these people on this human rights activism, and also maybe for the first time in their life, they met directors, because we work with Turkish directors living in Adana, Tufan Şimşekcan and Ozan Sihay. So it was the first time they saw really the filmmakers and the NGO workers like us, and also we also bring some volunteers with us. So to have a dialogue with different kind of people, different kind of institutions other than public institutions who come to visit them. So that was the basic idea behind our project.
Thank you, Sinem. This is this giving voice to these people is very important. We are a bit short on time, but I would like to ask you two very crucial questions. One of them is, can you just tell us about what has been happening on the ground before COVID-19 with regard to these sort of the labor situation, primarily about your focus area, and also how has COVID-19 impacted the work of the laborers and also your work as an organization?
Okay. Seasonal agriculture work going on in Turkey for almost 12 months. Turkey is a very rich, fertile land, and it's not just producing the food and the raw materials for its population, but also the population outside of the country. Probably you eat Turkish food over there in UK as well, or wear the clothes that are produced in Turkey from Turkish cotton. So the labor force needed these jobs, and also we need them. So the situation for them has not been changed a lot, unfortunately, for the lifetime of development workshop for 18 years. But the thing is, after COVID, they are also affected in a bad way, I may say, because the thing is, because of the some challenges to go to other provinces, to commute, to transport to other places, where this limitation of, in 31 provinces, there's limitation of access to the province. They couldn't go. So what they can do, this is the only job they know for years, for ages, for generations. So this one part is related to the ones who left behind. So they're under poverty line already, so that they go deeper and deeper down. So the ones they go actually live as if nothing is happening, because they are very isolated. They don't receive any masks, any, this, how they call it, the cologne, or any hygiene materials. They didn't have it. But this is both very bad for their health and also for the food security, because they're the ones who are harvesting the food. So at the moment, we are trying to monitor the situation and to document it and to advocate for the public institutions to act on it. Not much is done. Mostly the municipalities and the governorates try to give this kind of supplies, but it's just one time, 2 times. But the thing is, because of these food security issues, they became a hot topic of the country and of the world. But you'll see in 2 weeks, everyone will start to forget them again. So we are trying to use this opportunity as an NGO to remind this. And that's why we've been working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in the Bayrams, in the holidays and everything, just to produce more materials, more advocacy materials, and to have more information sharing kind of events and or activities.
Thank you very much, Sinem, for this crucial work. We will save some questions for the later. If anybody has them, please put them into the chat box. Thank you very much. And now I would like to welcome Volkan Princip, who is the operations coordinator from Support to Life. Welcome, Volkan, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. So, Support to Life has been around for a very, long time and working primarily in the disaster-affected communities. For this year, right after the Elazığ earthquake happened, as Turkey Mosaic Foundation, we mobilized the relief fund, as and most of our donors really contributed amazingly to this, and both for the Elazığ one and for the refugee crisis that has happened, Support to Life have been a very important organization in collecting data and coordinating the groundwork. So can you first of all tell us a little bit about Support to Life? It's been around for a long time. What has been the work and some history behind it and your work?
All right. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. So STL was established in 2005 with the principal aim of helping disaster affected people meet their basic needs and rights. So we are actually working with disasters and emergencies. So, and it was initiated by 5 women who had international humanitarian experiences in different countries. Somehow they have seen the lack of a Turkish humanitarian organization which would follow humanitarian principles and these global standards. And this is how they decided to establish STL in 2005, bringing their humanitarian experience together. And since then, STL, I keep as the abbreviation, Support to Life, Hayata Destek. STL, as STL, we are conducting our activities with principles of humanity, impartiality, naturality, independence, and accountability, and of course, applying core humanitarian standards. Because, I mean, the time the STL was established, actually in Turkey, the humanitarian work was always associated with charity, faith-based charity organizations mainly. So, I mean, the standards were not that much discussed. That's somehow the story behind STL. And since then, STL has responded to several emergencies and disasters in Turkey and in the region, such as in Iran, Bam and Tabriz earthquakes, Kashmir earthquake, floods in Pakistan, and in Turkey, Sima 1, and recently Elazığ earthquakes. But of course, our responses to emergencies are not limited to natural disasters, but we are also somehow like responding humanitarian crises, which are, I would say, human-made or political disasters as well. So, I mean, STL is also supporting Syrian refugees or also non-Syrian refugees in Turkey since 2012 as well. Just a small anecdote or some small figures. I mean, according to UNHCR, the United Nations of, I mean, the UN agency about refugees, there's around 71 million refugees, 71 million people displaced in the world, while 41 million of them are displaced within their own countries. Around 30 million people were had to flee to other countries, and now Turkey is hosting around 4.2 million refugees, and this is the highest number of refugees hosted by a single country. So somehow, this, I mean, considering this as a humanitarian crisis as well, STL started to respond and support refugees, which became one of our main programs. So basically, STL is working on 4 main areas. As I mentioned, the rapid response, the emergency response is our main mandate. Then refugee support program due to the Syrian refugee crisis is our second program. But we are also working just very similar to development workshop. We are also working on child protection. We have some programs on child protection in agricultural, seasonal agricultural areas. And we also try to increase capacities of other stakeholders, including NGOs and even government offices, on these 3 other topics. So capacity building is another component, a separate component that STL has been working. I mean, in a nutshell, I would say this is what STL has been doing. Maybe I can just give a few more sentences about what we do about refugees. So I mean, we somehow follow the trend or the needs of the people because we are working on needs-based. So in the beginning, when the Syrian, I mean, the refugee influx started, STL mainly targeted the basic needs of the people. Just after that, STL started to establish community centers or protections offices to support people living out of the camp to access their basic rights. I mean, there are simple, very simple things that maybe we may not consider, but being registered, accessing to health, being able to register your children to school. So, I mean, after basic needs, protection activities took place, and we still are implementing protection activities in 8 cities in Turkey. And I would say it's a late response, but still we are trying our best to involve refugees in the economic income. So somehow trying to support them to go out of aid dependency by livelihood activities. That's what we are doing.
Thank you. Since you already mentioned the refugee crisis, maybe we can talk about right before COVID-19 struck us, we actually the borders opened and many refugees flocked to the borders, and there have been again another rise of a crisis, and your organization was very pivotal in this. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about what happened, a little bit about then, that, maybe if you can describe us. I mean, we followed it from the news, but your reflections from the ground is very different. And also what happened, after COVID-19, we don't hear about any of this.
All right. So I mean, unfortunately, refugees has always been a subject to be used in the negotiations between governments. And the Turkish EU deal, where Turkey agreed to keep refugees in Turkey by receiving 3 billion plus 3 billion euros, so the 6 billion euros. So somehow these political discussions and political decisions lead the, I mean, all the consequences are directly affecting the lives of refugees. So unfortunately, the situation in Syria is also affecting a lot, because 22 Turkish soldiers were killed in an attack supported by Russian groups in the Syria. And unfortunately, that night, from presidency office, they mentioned that they are not going to keep the borders controlled that straight or that strict. Somehow it's leads chaos on the people, and people somehow they started to sell their belongings. Refugees, I'm talking about refugees, they start to sell their belongings, trying to collect cash as much as possible. And for a better life hope, they all moved to Western border. And I mean, it was somehow similar story when I was in the border of Syria in 2014 when the influx were coming. Unfortunately, again now in 2020, people were trying to move to Greece and then to Europe. Actually, the main target is mainly Germany. But and the situation was, of course, I mean, of course, the Greek border control or the Greek authorities did not let anybody go in. So people had to pay to human traffickers. People had to risk their lives, and even unfortunately, we have lost some lives trying to cross the border by the river. Some people were drowned. Some people were shot by the Greek forces. I mean, it was shameful disaster, I would say. And people had to stay in the border. They were waiting in Pazarkule with the hope that the Greek side will open the border. And of course, they had no shelter, they had no proper clothes, no enough food to keep them wait there for 2 weeks. So this is where STL, we took action, and we were one of the first NGOs who went to the area to make a rapid assessment. And we shared this information with the whole humanitarian actors in Turkey and internationally. And I mean, our added value in Edirne, of course, we provide some basic needs, also with support from Mosaic Foundation, but we also helped a lot in the coordination, because the government authorities always, I mean, NGOs' role is very critical when the government organizing the aid distribution and everything. So we were trying to keep this humanitarian standards, impartiality, neutrality, and humanity as the main actor. So we tried our best to organize the events there, but with the COVID, first COVID positive case was reported in Turkey, people were taken, I mean, refugees were taken under quarantine in different cities. And after that, after 14 days past the quarantine period was ended, refugees were expecting to be sent back to the cities where they were residing or where they were living previously. But unlikely, they were sent to some other cities where they should be registered. And again, those people who were without any material support in Edirne were sent to the different cities where they had no idea, no connection, no social security. And that's where, again, STL and some other NGOs took part, and we supported those families to go back to the cities where they have their families or social network. Yeah, I don't know if I could summarize it.
Yes, thank you. And maybe with one sentence, with one last 2 sentences, if you can just talk about the Elazığ earthquake, because one of the things that I think that helped us make a decision at Mosaic Foundation, Turkey Mosaic Foundation, is the kind of data and need analysis that you made. And so maybe if you can just talk very briefly before we move to our next.
Just maybe one sentence more about Edirne. In Edirne, thanks to Mosaic Foundation, actually we supported 3,840 babies and children with nourished, ready-to-eat baby formula. This was one of the basic needs response that we have implemented there. And we have also supported around 200 individuals by transportation or accommodation support after the COVID response. So this is what we have achieved thanks to Mosaic Foundation. It was very valuable. And in Elazığ earthquake as well, our first mandate or our first goal after an emergency is to go to the field as soon as possible and create a rapid assessment data so that we can share with people. So this is what we did. In just after the 11 hours after the hit, actually our teams of 2 groups of in total 10 people were in Malatya and Elazığ started their rapid assessments. Luckily the situation in Elazığ was not that bad as considering the magnitude of the hit. So we were expecting more loss of life. We were expecting, but we were afraid that there would be more loss of lives and loss of living standards. Unfortunately, luckily the situation was not that bad, but even for this, I would say, moderate scale emergency, there was a chaos in the coordination of humanitarian response. So there were many NGOs in Elazığ with some relief items, but they had no idea how to distribute it, how to identify the vulnerable people, or how to deal with the situation itself. So they had no idea. And this was our added value as STL. So we created, of course, with participation of other NGOs, we created a coordination mechanism in Edirne. And within this coordination mechanism, we provided some trainings on psychological first aid, how to identify needs, how to do a distribution in a safe manner, or code of conduct, how to deal with people while distributing, how to show respect, their dignity and everything. But we have also realized that these NGOs, most of them were coming from different cities, were planning to stay in Elazığ only a few weeks. So in that moment, we started to search for a more sustainable solution. And thanks to, again, Mosaic Foundation. So our project was to we targeted to create a sustainable solution by including senior social service students from the local university in the assessment and distribution processes. So even after we left or the other NGOs left, we kept supervising those students, and they started to take part in distribution and assessment activities of the government as well. So somehow we created a atmosphere where it already started support by the local sources over there. And again, with an amendment during the project, we also supported 165 households with COVID-specific hygiene kits in Elazığ, one of the Elazığ container camps. This is what we have achieved with Mosaic Foundation again. I think this is also maybe more, if you have more questions, I can try to explain in the question and answers.
Thank you very much, Volkan, for answering my questions, and also, for the amazing work. Now, we will be having Liana Varon from Support Foundation for Civil Society in Turkey, who is also our partner foundation on the ground, and one of our trustees, Yuri Kurtaran from Turkey Mosaic Foundation, who will be discussing how COVID-19 impacted the civil society in Turkey, as well as our strategy going forward.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear, see familiar faces. So we will try to keep it as short as possible, because after us, Yalın will be closing our whole session. But in a nutshell, what we will be speaking about is how COVID-19 has affected the civil society of Turkey, because probably 2 or 3 months ago, if we were to be told that we will be locked in our houses for the coming 2 months, we would all be say, yeah, next. But it doesn't work like that. So in that sense, it affected our lives deeply, but also it affected, and it is still affecting, the civil society and the civil society organizations in Turkey and on the global scale also. So what we did was a need assessment with our current grantees in order to understand what's going on in the field and how it affected the organizations and their work. And we tuned our grant programs and strategy for 2020 accordingly. So I'll just leave the floor to Liana for her to tell you about the need assessment and what we find there. And then I will continue about how we tuned our grant strategies.
Thank you. So just to continue from where Yurick left, actually when the COVID-19 outbreak started, we knew as Support Foundation for Civil Society with our partner Turkey Mosaic Foundation that it will require us to make some changes in the way we give grants and the amount of grants we will be distributing for the rest of the year. But our initial need was to better understand how COVID-19 is already affecting civil society organizations in Turkey, as well as their future projections on what will happen next after the emergency period. So as Yurick was saying, between March 25th and April 3rd, we started an online consultation process, a needs assessment process, where we got to talk with all of our grantees, experts from the field, as well as different stakeholders such as grant-making organizations in Turkey. And our aim was basically just to understand how civil society organizations, our grantees, are being affected by COVID-19. Their projects, our grants, how are they being affected? But also what their projections were in terms of what's going to happen next and what their needs are going to be, so that we can be prepared to better support them in these difficult times. And as a result of this consultation period, we actually have seen some trends emerging, or a list of responses that were developed by civil society in Turkey. And the first thing has been that many of our grantees and civil society at large was able to quickly respond to the crisis, especially by digitalizing their work, continuing to work with their beneficiaries, provide them services, do online meetings and webinars. But some of the organizations, due to the nature of their work, because it required them to be in face-to-face environments such as schools, working with children and everything, they were not able to do this transformation. They were not able to go digital. So instead, they used this period to support their organizational capacity, doing things like, revisiting their communication strategies, building on their database, websites, basically the work they have had no chance to do over the past months because they were busy working on the field. So it is possible to say that civil society was able to respond quickly in that sense, getting more familiar with technological and digital tools so that they can continue their work. But it also showed us that there's also need in terms of infrastructure, in terms of being able to access these digital tools, especially because we are supporting as our grantees small and medium-sized organizations. And the other thing is that there's also this need for expertise in order to be able to transform your work, what you have been doing on face-to-face terms, to the digital world. So these two main areas has been one of the trends that we addressed talking to our grantees. And above that, I think what has been one of the topics that we really talked or heard about was that COVID-19 has brought a real period of uncertainties in terms of when we will go back to normal, and also what the new normal will look like. And there was this, again, repeated expectation that COVID-19, this emergency period with COVID-19 will be followed by an economic crisis. So it meant that while on the one hand, the demand or need for civil society's work and services are increasing, the organization's capacity or the organization's access to financial resources have been decreasing because, basically, of a potential crisis, and also organizations that were planning to do a lot of fundraising events over spring are no longer able to do that. So that brought a lot of pressure for the organizations because they felt this kind of uncertainty that is happening around them is going to result in a much bigger crisis on their side. While this is definitely a challenging time for all of us and all the organizations, I think we have noticed that in this needs assessment period, there are opportunities for organizations as well. Opportunities in the sense that this pandemic is requiring all of us to redefine or restructure how we work, who we work with, what kind of tools we use when we work with our beneficiaries or different groups. So while it's challenging and difficult, it's at the same time is giving civil society a chance to redefine, restructure itself. In any case, it looks like, at least from what we heard from all the consultation process, civil society is going to be needing resources in order to survive this emergency period and then adapt to the new reality that's going to follow the COVID-19 pandemic, but also transform themselves so that they will be relevant once this crisis is over. And finally, I just want to share with you that support from grant-making organizations such as Turkey Mosaic Foundation will be more crucial than ever in the sense that there's need for more resources to keep civil society alive, to help them adapt, help them transform themselves, so that they can continue to support their beneficiaries, but also advocate for a better environment, for human rights, and build back better from what has been happening. So that will be pretty much.
Thank you, Liana. And maybe just to add to what Liana has outlined, in 2020, all of our thematic funds will be launched just like last year, more or less in the amounts that we provided last year, more or less. And of course, while we are implementing these grant programs, we will be keeping in mind that there will be new organizational needs that needs to be responded. So we will keep in mind that whatever thematic fund that we are launching, there is always room to tune it a little bit at the time that we are launching it, because in a time of uncertainty, we don't know what will happen. So that's the first thing. And maybe secondly and lastly, everybody is saying that there will be an economical downturn, a crisis coming globally. And of course, it will have its dramatic effect on Turkey also, which means whatever we do thematically, we also need to take into consideration issues such as unemployment, anti-poverty, deprivation, and all these kinds of thematic things also. So in that sense, the future is uncertain, and the strategy that we put here is just a framework, but yet we will see what will happen in these uncertain times. However, although the future is uncertain, there is more or less a calendar of what we will be doing in 2020. And I'm just now giving the word to Yalın so that he will be talking about the near future of Turkey Mosaic. Yalın, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yörük. Let me pick up exactly where you left that, and let's move on to the programs. I think what's happening in the world, of course, as you all know, is these are exceptionally big events that are on the way. So for any organization to maintain any sense of normalcy compared to last year is extremely challenging, whether you're a charity or a for-profit company, whether you're a listed business, whether you're a family business, whether you're a family. It's not easy to have the same year as you had last year. So this is really important, and we're really working hard to maintain as much of a business as usual operations as possible this year, and we're going to be working even harder to achieve that. As Yörük mentioned, the 4 quarterly funds, gender equality, institutional, culture and arts, and children's, we're planning to open them in the same way. In fact, We have already opened and closed and selected the grantees in the Gender Equality Fund. We'll talk about that at next year's annual meeting. We've spoken about some of the tragic events that have taken place and the need that we saw to step in for individual relief funds. We've spoken about the Elazığ earthquake. Just maybe one comment on that as well. We opened this up on Just Giving as a completely public sort of fundraise. And we were overwhelmed with the support that we got. Most importantly, wasn't necessarily the amount, but the number of supporters that we reached. Many of them are not on the Zoom meeting tonight. Many of them have never been to our meeting. So this was a very powerful impact of spreading the word and reaching to other parts of the UK outside of London, and people we've never met before supported our cause and trusted us. And you've heard what we're doing with that trust. Likewise, the Refugee Fund will remain open for the course of the year. And earlier this year, we launched our COVID-19 Response Fund as well for emergency support. And that will be something we'd like to wrap up early summer, and we'll announce where the grantees are and who the grantees will be in due course. Moving on to some of our events for the year. We started the year with a donor event in January and Trivet, and I saw Isa Bal among the attendees. Thank you very much for your hosting of that event, Isa, once again. Then we had our gender equality panel, Nilüfer spoke about in March. And we had actually planned a number of events for April, May, June, and for the rest of the year as well in person. Sadly, we've had to change all of that, the format of all of that, and they've had to be postponed, including our annual meeting, which we're obviously now holding online. But what I have seen is, both with Sinem and with Volkan, this format worked quite well. And maybe we can consider doing some individual or group events online for our donors. It's always been a very important part of our thesis to show the impact in person that your donations make. So we will be working on this. And in fact, the study trip, we still call it a trip, but this year we will be holding this online. Study trip is a very important part of what we do. We've been holding it now for 3 years, and it's potentially a life-changing event. To go there in person and to see the real impact of what social entrepreneurs like Sinem, like Volkan and others talk about, and to see their site or to see the people they deal with is potentially a life-changing event, as I said. So the negative about going in person has been that only very few of our donors have been able to join us in these trips before. Maybe when we do it online, the positive might be more of our donors will be able to attend. So watch the space. We'll be announcing this in June and over the next month. Fundraising. This is a difficult year, and we're aware of that. Yörük spoke about this. We are aware of how difficult things are at the moment. But of course, as Yörük said, things are difficult in the UK. Things are difficult everywhere in the world. But on the ground, civil society organizations are really, really going to struggle if donors don't step up and do something. So we actually feel like almost like our mission has been even more validated in terms of what we need to do and work even harder. Where individual donations might be less than last year, perhaps, we're working really hard on maintaining that with corporate donors and other ways to make up for it. The two charts that Nilüfer showed, where we increased our donations last year and increased our grants distributed last year, we would love it if a third year we can still show growth, especially on the grants side of things, because that's our key KPI. So we'll be working really hard on that. Your one-off donations are really important for us. Your regular and repeat donations are also really important. Every little helps. The importance of the regular and repeat donations is we can look ahead. If we know certain funds are coming in the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, we can go back to our fund programs and be a bit more aggressive about what we might be able to do in the future and work with the organizations on the ground and make commitments to them. So every little helps. And our ask to you is to please be generous with whatever you can support us with. Hopefully we've given you a sense for the impact that we have already generated with your donations. Keep following us. We'll be telling you more about it. And if any of this resonated with you, if any of these stories moved you, then we would love it if you could continue to support us. And if you cannot be generous with your donations, please be generous with your time. Please be generous with your likes on social media. Please be generous with spreading the word. Please be generous with your reposts. Forward it to 10 friends. Make sure friends sign up to our newsletter. We tripled our Instagram followers last year compared to our first year. And we would love it if we could continue that kind of trend going forward. So please be generous with your time. Also think about us for any event that you do, any marathon you feel like doing, any home-based activity on the treadmill or whatever fundraising event you may have in mind. We would love it if you could consider us. Your children might be interested in fundraising. We've done a children's activity before. It's great. They learn about charity and we get to raise funds. So please keep us in mind for all of those things. Our friends of Mosaic, our ambassadors, our volunteers have been extremely important to our program so far. And we'd like to thank you once again for everything you have historically done for us. And please be creative and come up with ideas again this year as well. With that, I guess the last thing we'd like to say, of course, is thank you for your support one more time. On behalf of the team, Burak, Nilüfer, Oya, myself, Yörük, Ergen, İpek, and Cemil, and Liana, of course, we'd like to thank you very much for your attention this evening. And I'm going to be checking the chat one more time to see if there are any questions. Right. I do not see any questions. I'm seeing some thank you messages, and we'd like to thank you very much for that, for these warm words. If people are interested in asking a live question, you could unmute yourself, and we'd love to address it as well. We have not done it so far, but if anybody would like to jump ahead with a question, we're here. And by the way, before we leave, I'd also like to thank Sinem and Volkan one more time for your time, for joining us this evening, and hearing your stories was fascinating, so thank you for that. And let me see if there are any live questions from the group, or if everybody's going to be shy. Right. I'm not seeing any live questions.
Maybe like as an icebreaker. Hi, it's Ali Arat here. Excellent presentation, Turkey Mosaic team. I think this has been fantastic. I just had a quick question on how the different funds work across the years. As you know, Mosaic is built through over the years. I think there will be certain recurring themes, and obviously certain charities will still be standing out amongst those. I basically want to understand, you know, for example, during 2020 or 2021, will Mosaic continue to support the charities that it has selected as part of the previous funds? That was my question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Unless any of my colleagues jump in, I'm happy to take this one. So this is a discussion we've had numerous times. In our first year, we supported 19 charities. In our second year, we supported 16 charities, but we distributed larger amounts. So we actually had a similar view of, once we have found a team that really has moved us with what they've done, we're very interested in trying to see what else we can do with them. And we have actually increased the amounts in certain cases. If it's been an institutional support, we focused on a project. If it's been a project support, we focused on an institutional support perhaps in the following year. The COVID relief fund that we've opened up this week is actually only available to our prior and current grantees. So that's another important point, because again, we felt like it might be in some cases perhaps even an existentialist sort of situation for some of these organizations. If all of your fundraising events are canceled and you don't have the mechanism to raise funds through online events, we've decided to support our existing organizations. I would like to pick on one of my colleagues, and I would actually like Yörük, if you don't mind, to unmute yourself and maybe talk about also the mentoring aspect as well that we've developed, that you've developed in Turkey, on this added support to organizations that we know well.
Just a summary, maybe at the end of the day, continuing on what Yalın has said, I mean, it's one thing to support organizations, but it's another thing to support organizations financially and provide some form of other opportunities to them. be it mentoring, be it strategy building. So in our core funding institutional fund, what we have developed with Sivil Toplum için Destek Vakfı last year is to have some form of a capacity building component that is providing support to the organizations in parallel to the grants. So this is something that we are thinking more, because at the end of the day, we see the value and the impact of it on the field. So we are looking for ways to maybe try to come up with other solutions where it is not only financial support that we do, but other forms of support to these organizations. So we are working on that. But yes, you are right. It's very important to provide support to certain organizations every year so that their minds are clear and they concentrate on what they do and not fundraising.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that response. I appreciate that.
Excellent. There's a great suggestion I see in the chat group, which we will keep in mind. So thank you for that, Zeynep. There's also another question. Where do you think you have made the greatest impact? Would any of my colleagues like to offer a response? I have something in mind, but let's maybe hear from someone else. Or shall I go ahead first? All right, I'll go ahead first. Ergem's pointing at me, but please feel free to jump in, guys. I think it's very difficult to pick a single organization that has made a greater impact than someone else. We do focus on the issues we spoke about, you know, children, women, education, health, environment, and culture and arts. Each one of these are extremely important in our view, and the topics we tackle, as you know, are really important. I think where we've made the greatest impact is actually here in the UK, you know, among our Turkish community. We ourselves started Mosaic because it didn't exist before. We were looking for something, we couldn't find anything, and we decided to do it ourselves. And I think when I see some of our children on the Youth for Youth challenge that we did last year out there trying to raise, you know, funds for charity to support our causes, when I see the bazaar that our friends of Mosaic put together last year with a couple of hundred people in a room, everyone volunteering, everyone trying to help raise funds for us, I think we may have had a bit of an impact on the Turkish community here in the UK. And that would be the answer I would give in terms of the greatest impact we've had so far. I don't know if any of my colleagues would like to offer another view.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Oya. I'm one of the founders as well of Turkey Mosaic Foundation. I agree with Yalın in that the UK has one of the biggest impacts that we actually didn't expect before, because the money that we generate here is fresh money. It's not from any fresh money, meaning it's coming directly from donors. It's not from any other grant giving organizations. So it's for the first time, this money is for the first time going directed to the civil society organizations and to Turkey. So that's one innovation. And for Turkey, one of the reasons why we set up Mosaic Foundation is because the charities that we wanted to select are relatively smaller ones. And one of the most important questions that we ask ourselves when we're selecting during our board meetings is, if we don't give this organization any money, where else are they going to find money? So the potential access to funds for these organizations is one of the things that we consider very, very strongly. And also some of the harder to find projects, harder to find finances for some of the projects are the ones that we try to select to fill that gap in their finances. Yeah. And anyone else?
I want to take a few words. I like the work we done with the Elazığ earthquake donations, I would say, because that wasn't something we had on our mind before. We all choose our funds and grant programs. But when this thing happened in our meeting, we felt the pressure to do something and take action, even though it wasn't in our foundation's founding courses, I would say. So even from our friends and the people who spread the word, we first set up the target as £10,000, and then we increased to 15 and 20, and we overachieved that number. I felt as a huge success for us because it wasn't in our minds when it was happening before. So that was something I felt really special. And now people are asking, aren't you doing anything about COVID, or if something bad happens? So that's a motivation tool for us as well on this long adventure, I would say. Emin abi.
Right. I don't see any other questions, and I know it's probably nearly dinner time, and probably some children that we've locked up in our closets. We may need to get out now. So one last chance for any other question, and then we will close. Perhaps not. Look, thank you so much again from all of us. Ooh, there is a question. How about a virtual gala? Sure, why not? Let's have a chat about this. I think we will absolutely be thinking about some creative virtual events, because for the foreseeable future, I don't see us getting all in a big room again for some time. So we will absolutely be thinking about those things. So thank you for the suggestion again, Zeynep. And with that, we will end the meeting, our second annual meeting. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your support, and thanks for your attention. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye. Şöyle yapalım. Bir dakika. Ali Aracı beğeniyor musun? Peki. Okey. Kapatalım.